I was 21 years old when my parents destroyed my future in 88 words. Sitting across from them at our kitchen table, I held my acceptance letter to Carnegie Mellon's computer science program with trembling hands. My father slid the letter back, without reading it, his voice cold as winter steel. "We cannot afford to send two sons to college, Jules. Your brother Derek needs the money more for his business degree since he struggles academically." My mother nodded in agreement, adding that I was naturally smart and would figure things out on my own while Derek required their financial support and guidance to succeed in life. The months following that devastating conversation felt like watching my dreams die in slow motion. Every morning, I woke up in my childhood bedroom, staring at college brochures taped to my wall, remnants of a future that had been ripped away from me without warning or discussion. My parents treated the decision as final, refusing to entertain any conversation about scholarships, student loans, or alternative funding options that might allow me to pursue my education. I took a job at CompuFix, a small computer repair shop downtown, owned by a quiet man named Gary Rodriguez. The pay was minimum wage, but Gary quickly recognized my natural ability with technology. While my classmates prepared for their freshman year at universities across the country, I spent my days diagnosing hardware failures and learning to rebuild corrupted operating systems from scratch. Gary became an unexpected mentor during those difficult months. He taught me advanced programming concepts during slow afternoons, sharing knowledge about network architecture and cybersecurity protocols that most students wouldn't encounter until their junior year. His patient instruction provided the technical education my parents had denied me, though I knew it could never replace the structured learning and credentials of a formal degree. Meanwhile, Derek began his freshman year at State University studying business management. Our parents drove him to campus in August, helping him move into a spacious dormitory and celebrating his new independence with a dinner at an expensive steakhouse. I watched from my bedroom window as they loaded his car with new clothes, electronics, and spending money, their pride evident in every gesture and conversation. The contrast between our situations became increasingly painful as autumn progressed. Derek called home weekly with stories about fraternity parties, spring break planning, and networking opportunities with wealthy classmates. My parents hung on his every word, asking detailed questions about his courses and praising his social connections as investments in his future success. I enrolled part-time at the local community college, paying tuition with money saved from my repair shop wages. The classes were challenging but rewarding, and I maintained a perfect grade point average despite working 40 hours per week. However, my academic achievements received little acknowledgement from my family, who seemed to view my education as a hobby rather than a serious pursuit. Thanksgiving dinner revealed the first crack in my parents' carefully constructed narrative about equal treatment. My Aunt Sarah questioned why I wasn't attending a 4-year university, given my exceptional grades and obvious talent with computers. She mentioned seeing my programming projects during a previous visit, expressing genuine confusion about my educational path. My father deflected her questions with vague responses about financial constraints and different learning styles. He claimed they were treating both sons equally according to our individual needs, suggesting that Derek required more structured support while I thrived with independence and practical experience. That evening, as family members shared coffee and discussed their plans for the upcoming year, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Walking past the kitchen counter, I noticed Derek had left his credit card statement open beside his laptop. Curiosity overcame my better judgment, and I glanced at the charges listed on the monthly summary. What I saw made my stomach drop like a stone thrown into deep water. Monthly charges exceeded $3,000, including fraternity dues, expensive restaurant meals, designer clothing purchases, and entertainment expenses that rivaled my entire semester's earnings. The statement revealed a lifestyle of luxury and privilege that contradicted everything my parents had told me about financial limitations. I stood frozen in the kitchen, processing the implications of those numbers. While my parents claimed they couldn't afford my college tuition, they were funding Derek's extravagant social life without question or concern. The disparity wasn't just about education anymore. It represented a fundamental difference in how they valued their son's needs and futures. When I confronted my parents privately later that evening, their defensive reactions confirmed my worst suspicions. They became angry and uncomfortable, insisting that Derek needed social connections for his future career, while I should be grateful for any educational opportunities at all. They dismissed my concerns about fairness, claiming I wouldn't understand the networking requirements of business school. My mother's words cut deepest of all. She insisted that Derek's fraternity membership and social activities were investments in his professional development, while my technical skills would speak for themselves regardless of educational credentials. Her tone implied that my abilities made me less deserving of support, as if natural talent exempted me from needing the same opportunities as my brother. The conversation ended with my father warning me never to question their financial decisions again. He reminded me that I was fortunate to have a roof over my head and a job that utilized my interests, suggesting that many young people would envy my situation. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized my parents viewed me as the expendable child. I was someone who would succeed regardless of their support, while Derek received every advantage despite showing little appreciation or responsibility. The favoritism wasn't subtle or unconscious. It was deliberate and systematic, designed to benefit one son at the expense of the other. Winter brought new challenges and revelations that would forever change my relationship with my family. The computer repair shop business slowed during the holiday season, giving Gary and me time to work on more complex projects for small businesses needing network upgrades and security improvements. These experiences taught me skills that typically required years of formal education, and I began to appreciate the practical value of hands-on learning. However, my dreams of completing a traditional college education never faded. I spent evenings researching scholarship opportunities and financial aid programs, determined to find a path toward my bachelor's degree despite my family's lack of support. My community college counselors encouraged these efforts, recognizing my potential and dedication despite the obstacles I faced. Derek returned home for winter break, driving a silver sports car that immediately caught the attention of our entire neighborhood. When my parents asked about the expensive vehicle, he casually mentioned it was a gift from his girlfriend's wealthy family, who appreciated his potential and wanted to support his academic success. The explanation seemed questionable, but my parents accepted it without further investigation. They praised Derek's ability to form meaningful relationships with influential people, viewing the car as validation of their investment in his social education. I watched this interaction with growing skepticism, recognizing patterns of deception that my parents seemed unwilling to acknowledge. During Derek's week-long visit, I noticed him taking frequent phone calls in private, often stepping outside or retreating to his bedroom when conversations became heated. The calls seemed to upset him significantly, and I observed him pacing anxiously while speaking in hushed, urgent tones to unknown parties on the other end. One evening, while my parents watched television in the living room, Derek's voice carried through the thin walls of our house. I overheard him discussing money and debts with someone who clearly held leverage over him. Words like payment, deadline, and consequences drifted through the heating vents, creating a picture of financial trouble that contradicted his apparent prosperity. My suspicions were confirmed 3 days before Derek's return to campus. I found him in the kitchen at 2 a.m, sitting at the same table where my college dreams had died months earlier. His face was streaked with tears, and his usual confident demeanor had collapsed into genuine panic and desperation. When he noticed me standing in the doorway, Derek broke down completely. Through halting sobs, he confessed that he owed $15,000 to dangerous people connected to underground poker games near campus. What had started as casual gambling with fraternity brothers had escalated into high-stakes games with professional players who extended credit to naive college students. The sports car wasn't a gift from his girlfriend's family. Derek had purchased it with borrowed money from these same dangerous individuals, using it as collateral against future winnings that never materialized. Now they were demanding immediate payment with interest rates that increased daily, accompanied by threats that terrified him into sleepless nights and constant anxiety. Derek begged me not to reveal his situation to our parents, claiming he could handle the problem himself if given more time. However, his terror was genuine and overwhelming, and I realized he was in far more trouble than he could manage alone. Despite my anger about the preferential treatment he had received, I felt genuine concern for his safety and well-being. The next morning, Derek tearfully confessed everything to our parents during breakfast. He laid out the full scope of his gambling debts, the threats he had received, and the immediate danger he faced if the money wasn't repaid quickly. His vulnerability was heartbreaking, and I watched my parents' faces transform from shock to protective determination. Their response revealed the depths of their favoritism in ways that still cause me pain today. Within hours, they had comforted Derek, promised to handle everything, and begun making phone calls to liquidate assets and secure the money he needed. There was no lecture about responsibility, no discussion of consequences, no requirement that Derek face the natural results of his choices. Instead, my parents treated his crisis as a family emergency that required immediate sacrifice from everyone except Derek himself. They spoke about protecting him from dangerous people and ensuring his safety, framing their rescue as an act of parental love rather than enabling behavior that would likely continue without meaningful consequences. The following morning, I received a phone call from my bank that changed everything. The customer service representative informed me that my savings account had been emptied overnight through a withdrawal authorized by joint account holders. The account contained money from my grandmother's inheritance, specifically designated in her will for my educational expenses, along with every dollar I had saved from my job at the repair shop. When I confronted my parents about this theft, their justification revealed the true depth of their bias and manipulation. They claimed that Derek's physical safety took priority over my educational aspirations, and that I could always earn money through my technical skills. They dismissed my grandmother's specific wishes regarding the inheritance, arguing that family emergencies superseded individual plans and preferences. My mother's words were particularly cruel. She suggested that my reaction was selfish and immature, claiming that a loving son would gladly sacrifice his future to protect his brother from harm. She implied that my anger demonstrated a lack of family loyalty and moral character, making me the villain in a situation where I was clearly the victim. My father's approach was more practical but equally devastating. He calculated the exact amount they had spent on my childhood expenses and suggested that Derek's current crisis balanced the scales of parental investment. In his mind, using my inheritance to save Derek represented fair distribution of family resources rather than theft and betrayal. That evening, staring at my empty bank account and facing the reality that my family would never prioritize my needs or respect my goals, I made the most difficult decision of my young life. I couldn't remain in a household where my value was measured solely by my usefulness in solving problems created by others, where my achievements were minimized and my aspirations were treated as expendable. I packed my belongings into 2 suitcases and a backpack, taking only personal items and gifts that held sentimental value. The process was emotionally devastating as I sorted through childhood memories and mementos that represented a family relationship that had never truly existed in the way I had believed. The next morning, I moved out of my family home and into a small studio apartment near the computer repair shop. The space was tiny and sparsely furnished, but it represented something my childhood home had never provided, a place where my goals and values were respected, where my efforts would benefit my own future rather than subsidizing someone else's mistakes. My studio apartment measured just 400 square feet, but those modest walls contained more freedom and possibility than I had ever experienced. The space included a kitchenette, a fold-out bed, and a small desk where I could study and work on programming projects. For the first time in my life, every decision I made served my own goals rather than accommodating someone else's priorities or cleaning up their mistakes. The initial weeks of independence were challenging in ways I hadn't anticipated. Cooking meals, managing utilities, and budgeting expenses required skills I had never developed while living at home. However, these practical challenges felt empowering rather than overwhelming because each success belonged entirely to me, unmarked by the complications and resentments that had poisoned my family relationships. Gary noticed the change in my demeanor immediately. My work performance improved dramatically as the weight of family disappointment lifted from my shoulders. I arrived early, stayed late, and approached every repair project with renewed enthusiasm and focus. Technical problems that had once frustrated me became puzzles I eagerly solved, and I began suggesting improvements to Gary's business processes and customer service procedures. My parents attempted to contact me frequently during those first months, alternating between guilt-inducing messages and angry demands that I return home. My mother left voicemails claiming that my absence was tearing the family apart, while my father sent text messages about responsibility and forgiveness. They seemed unable to comprehend that their actions had consequences or that rebuilding trust would require acknowledgement of wrongdoing rather than demands for compliance. Derek's messages were particularly difficult to ignore. He alternated between apologies for the situation and resentment that I had abandoned the family during their crisis. His texts revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of his role in creating the problems that had destroyed our relationships and an expectation that I should prioritize his comfort over my own well-being and future prospects. I maintained minimal contact with my family, responding to direct questions with brief, polite answers while avoiding emotional manipulation and requests for assistance. This approach protected my mental health while leaving the door open for genuine reconciliation if they chose to acknowledge their mistakes and demonstrate real change in their behavior and attitudes. Meanwhile, my academic progress accelerated beyond my expectations. Without the stress and distractions of family drama, I completed my associate degree requirements with distinction, earning recognition from professors who encouraged me to continue toward my bachelor's degree. My grades reflected my true potential rather than the limitations imposed by external circumstances beyond my control. Gary began assigning me increasingly complex projects that challenged my technical skills and business understanding. Local companies started requesting me specifically for network security consultations and data recovery services, recognizing my expertise and professionalism despite my age and unconventional background. These experiences provided practical education that complemented my formal coursework perfectly. One evening in March, while working late on a particularly challenging data recovery project, I discovered something that would change the trajectory of my career entirely. Gary had asked me to stay after hours to complete virus removal on a client's computer system, but the project required accessing network monitoring tools that seemed far more sophisticated than typical repair shop software. As I navigated through the security protocols, I realized that Gary was running multiple monitoring systems for major corporations throughout the region. The screens displayed real-time network activity, intrusion detection alerts, and vulnerability assessments for companies I recognized as significant players in healthcare, finance, and manufacturing sectors. Initially, I worried that Gary might be engaged in illegal surveillance or hacking activities. The sophistication of his equipment and the scope of his monitoring capabilities seemed inconsistent with a small computer repair business. However, closer examination revealed legitimate security certificates and professional contracts with each monitored organization. When Gary arrived the next morning, he found me studying documentation for the security monitoring systems. Instead of anger or concern about my discovery, he smiled and invited me to join him for coffee at the diner across the street. That conversation revealed the true nature of his business. and opened opportunities I had never imagined possible. Gary explained that CompuFix served as both a legitimate computer repair business and a front for Rodriguez Cybersecurity Solutions, a highly successful consulting firm he had operated for 8 years. The repair shop provided cover for his more sensitive work while serving as a training ground where he could identify individuals with the technical skills, ethical judgment, and personal integrity required for cybersecurity consulting. He had been observing my work habits, decision-making processes, and reactions to ethical dilemmas for months, waiting to determine whether I possessed the character necessary for his real business. My handling of customer data, my refusal to take shortcuts that might compromise security, and my respectful treatment of colleagues and clients had convinced him that I could be trusted with significant responsibilities. Gary offered me a position as Junior Security Analyst with Rodriguez Cybersecurity Solutions. The role included full health benefits, tuition reimbursement for completing my bachelor's degree through an accredited online program, and opportunities to earn industry certifications that would accelerate my career development. The starting salary was 3 times my current wages, providing financial stability I had never experienced. More importantly, Gary offered mentorship and partnership opportunities that could lead to partial ownership of the business within 5 years. He explained that cybersecurity was a rapidly growing field with enormous potential for individuals who combined technical expertise with business acumen and ethical standards. His offer represented not just employment but a comprehensive career development pathway. The timing felt surreal. While my family continued to struggle with the consequences of Derek's poor decisions and my parents' enabling behavior, I found myself presented with opportunities that exceeded my most optimistic expectations. The contrast highlighted how dramatically my life had improved since choosing independence over family dysfunction. That weekend, I called my community college counselors to discuss transferring my credits to an online bachelor's degree program that would complement my new position. The academic advisors were thrilled about my career advancement and helped design a course schedule that would allow me to work full-time while completing my education efficiently. Meanwhile, I learned through my Aunt Sarah that Derek had graduated with mediocre grades and moved back into my parents' house, unable to find employment despite his business degree and the networking opportunities they had funded so generously. His job search was complicated by gaps in his resume from time spent dealing with gambling-related problems, and his interview skills apparently failed to impress potential employers. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my parents had invested thousands of dollars in Derek's college experience and social connections, I had found genuine success through hard work, integrity, and the mentorship of someone who valued character over credentials. Their favoritism had backfired spectacularly, leaving Derek unprepared for adult responsibilities, while I thrived in an environment that rewarded competence and reliability. As spring turned to summer, I settled into my new role with Rodriguez Cybersecurity Solutions, learning to conduct vulnerability assessments for major clients and developing skills that would serve me throughout my career. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities for growth, reinforcing my decision to pursue independence rather than accepting a supporting role in my family's dysfunction. 3 years transformed my life in ways I could never have imagined during those dark months following my high school graduation. Rodriguez Cybersecurity Solutions grew from a regional consulting firm to a recognized leader in corporate network security, and my role expanded from junior analyst to Gary's business partner and co-owner of our rapidly expanding operation. The online bachelor's degree program challenged me intellectually while accommodating my full-time work schedule. My courses in network architecture, digital forensics, and cybersecurity law provided theoretical foundations for the practical skills I developed through client consultations and security assessments. Professors often used my real-world projects as case studies for other students, highlighting the unique value of combining academic knowledge with professional experience. My professional certifications accumulated steadily: Certified Information Systems Security Professional, Certified Ethical Hacker, Certified Information Security Manager. Each credential enhanced my credibility with clients and increased my earning potential significantly. By my 21st birthday, my annual income exceeded what my father earned after 30 years in middle management at a regional manufacturing company. The financial success felt gratifying, but the respect and recognition from industry professionals meant even more. Conference organizers invited me to speak about emerging cybersecurity threats, and technology publications featured articles about my innovative approaches to small business network security. My reputation was built on competence and integrity rather than family connections or inherited advantages. During this period, I maintained polite but distant contact with my family through brief text messages on holidays and birthdays. My responses to their occasional outreach were cordial but superficial, focusing on general well-being rather than specific details about my career or personal life. This approach protected my privacy while avoiding the appearance of complete estrangement. My Aunt Sarah served as an informal communication bridge, sharing general updates about family developments without pressure to increase my involvement. Through her, I learned that Derek continued living at home, cycling through various employment opportunities and entrepreneurial schemes that consistently failed to generate sustainable income or personal fulfillment. His pattern was depressingly predictable: initial enthusiasm for a new opportunity, followed by grandiose claims about potential success, then gradual excuse-making as results failed to materialize, and finally abandonment of the project when the next seemingly easy path to wealth captured his attention. Each cycle reinforced his dependence on our parents' financial and emotional support. My parents occasionally mentioned Derek's struggles during our infrequent phone conversations, always followed by subtle suggestions that I should return home to help support the family. They seemed unable to understand that my success had been achieved despite their obstacles rather than because of their assistance, and that my current position required maintaining professional relationships built on trust and reliability. The contrast between our paths became increasingly apparent as time passed. While Derek searched for shortcuts to success without developing foundational skills or work habits, I invested thousands of hours mastering complex technical disciplines and building a reputation for excellence. His approach sought immediate gratification while mine focused on long-term growth and sustainable achievement. One autumn evening, while reviewing security protocols for a major hospital network, I received an unusually excited call from my mother. Her voice carried a tone of enthusiasm I hadn't heard since Derek's high school graduation, and she could barely contain her excitement about developments in his life. She explained that Derek had finally discovered his true calling as an entrepreneur and investment advisor. After years of failed attempts at traditional employment, he had started a company called Pinnacle Investment Strategies that promised extraordinary returns through sophisticated cryptocurrency trading algorithms and market analysis techniques. According to my mother, Derek had convinced several family friends and neighbors to invest their savings with his new company, generating impressive early returns that validated his business model and investment expertise. She mentioned that he had moved into a luxury apartment downtown and purchased expensive suits and technology to support his professional image. Most concerning of all, she revealed that Derek had persuaded our parents to liquidate their retirement accounts to provide initial investment capital for Pinnacle Investment Strategies. They had withdrawn over $100,000 from their 401k plans and pension funds, expressing complete confidence in Derek's ability to multiply their investments through his innovative trading strategies. The conversation triggered immediate alarm bells based on my professional experience investigating financial crimes and cybersecurity breaches. I had encountered numerous cryptocurrency scams and Ponzi schemes during client consultations, and Derek's operation displayed classic warning signs that my parents apparently failed to recognize or chose to ignore. I attempted to warn my mother about the risks associated with unregulated investment schemes and the particular dangers of cryptocurrency speculation by inexperienced traders. I explained the importance of regulatory oversight, professional credentials, and diversified portfolios for retirement planning, emphasizing that legitimate investment advisors never guarantee specific returns or pressure clients to invest their entire savings. My mother's response revealed the depth of their continued favoritism and selective reasoning. She dismissed my concerns as jealousy over Derek's entrepreneurial success and suggested that my technical background didn't qualify me to evaluate business investments. She implied that Derek's natural charisma and sales abilities made him better suited for financial services than I would be with my focus on computer security. Her attitude demonstrated that years of enabling Derek's irresponsible behavior had created a complete blind spot regarding his competence and judgment. Rather than learning from his previous failures, my parents had doubled down on their investment in his success, risking their financial security on his unproven claims and grandiose promises. The call ended with my mother expressing disappointment that I couldn't celebrate Derek's achievements or offer encouragement for his new venture. She seemed genuinely confused by my skepticism, viewing it as evidence of sibling rivalry rather than legitimate concern based on professional knowledge and family history. That night, I lay awake considering whether I had any obligation to protect my parents from the financial disaster I could see approaching. However, previous attempts to share information or offer guidance had been rejected and resented. They had made their choice to trust Derek over their own retirement security despite abundant evidence of his poor judgment and unrealistic expectations. I realized that any further warnings would likely be interpreted as attempts to sabotage Derek's success rather than genuine concern for their welfare. My parents had consistently chosen to enable his irresponsible behavior while dismissing my achievements and advice, creating a dynamic where my input was unwelcome regardless of its validity or importance. 18 months passed before reality crashed through Derek's carefully constructed facade of success and prosperity. During that time, I had built Rodriguez Cybersecurity Solutions into a regional powerhouse with clients spanning multiple industries and annual revenues exceeding $2 million. Gary and I had purchased a downtown office building and hired 6 additional analysts, creating a professional environment that attracted top-tier corporate clients seeking comprehensive security solutions. My personal life had stabilized in ways that reflected the security and confidence I had gained through years of independent achievement. I was dating Jennifer, a nurse practitioner who shared my values regarding personal responsibility and professional integrity. We discussed marriage and were planning to purchase a house together, building a future based on mutual respect and shared goals. The contrast with Derek's situation had become increasingly stark, though I learned most details secondhand through family conversations that reached me via my Aunt Sarah. Derek's luxury apartment and expensive lifestyle were funded entirely by new investor money rather than legitimate trading profits, and his promises of extraordinary returns had created expectations he could never fulfill. On a Tuesday morning in November, while I was presenting security protocols to the board of directors for a regional bank, my phone buzzed with an urgent call from my father. The timing was particularly inappropriate, as I was in the middle of explaining network vulnerability assessments to executives who were considering a $100,000 consulting contract. I apologized to the board members and stepped outside to answer the call, expecting some minor family emergency that could be quickly resolved. Instead, my father's trembling voice delivered news that shook me, despite my predictions about Derek's inevitable failure. Derek's investment company had collapsed overnight, taking with it not only our parents' retirement savings, but also the life savings of over 30 families in our community. The scheme had unraveled when several investors simultaneously requested withdrawals that exceeded Derek's available funds, exposing the fact that no legitimate trading had ever occurred. My father's voice cracked, as he explained the scope of the devastation. Elderly couples who had trusted Derek based on his family connections faced immediate poverty, having lost retirement accounts they had spent decades accumulating. Small business owners were forced to declare bankruptcy after investing their operating capital in what they believed was a conservative growth strategy. The human cost of Derek's fraud extended far beyond financial losses. Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, our next-door neighbors for 15 years, had invested their entire retirement savings and now faced the possibility of losing their home. Maria Santos, who owned the corner bakery where I'd bought treats as a child, had invested her business expansion fund and was considering closing permanently. Local news coverage revealed the full scope of Derek's deception to the wider community. Pinnacle Investment Strategies had collected over $2 million from investors while generating zero legitimate returns through actual trading activities. Instead, Derek had used new investor money to pay fake returns to earlier investors while funding his personal lifestyle and creating an illusion of successful operations. The FBI had launched a federal investigation into wire fraud, securities violations, and operating an unregistered investment scheme. Derek faced potential prison sentences that could total decades, and federal prosecutors were reviewing whether to file additional charges related to money laundering and racketeering. My father begged me to return home immediately, claiming that the family needed my success and stability to weather this crisis. He suggested that my professional reputation and business connections could somehow help minimize Derek's legal exposure or negotiate reduced charges through character references and community support. The conversation revealed that my parents still fundamentally misunderstood the situation and my role within it. They viewed Derek's criminal behavior as a family problem requiring collective sacrifice rather than individual accountability for deliberate choices that had harmed innocent people throughout our community. When I refused to compromise my professional integrity or personal reputation by defending Derek's fraudulent activities, my father's tone shifted from pleading to accusatory. He claimed that a truly loyal son would sacrifice anything to protect his brother from legal consequences, regardless of the circumstances that had created the situation. My mother's subsequent phone call was even more painful and revealing. Through tears, she accused me of abandoning my family during their darkest hour and suggested that my refusal to help demonstrated fundamental character flaws. She seemed genuinely unable to comprehend that supporting Derek would require me to ignore the suffering of his victims and compromise the ethical standards that had built my career. Her words exposed the complete moral blindness that years of favoritism and enabling had created. Rather than feeling shame about Derek's crimes or empathy for his victims, my parents focused entirely on protecting him from consequences while expecting me to participate in that protection regardless of the cost to my own integrity. The conversation ended with my mother warning that my continued refusal to help would permanently damage our family relationships. She seemed to believe that threatening further estrangement would motivate me to abandon my principles, not recognizing that years of their choices had already destroyed any foundation for healthy family connections. That evening, Jennifer and I discussed the situation while reviewing architectural plans for our future home. Her perspective as someone outside my family dynamics provided clarity that I couldn't achieve on my own. She helped me understand that my parents' demands were not only unreasonable, but actively harmful to everyone involved, including Derek himself. Jennifer pointed out that continuing to enable Derek's irresponsible behavior would prevent him from experiencing the natural consequences necessary for genuine change. She reminded me that true love sometimes requires allowing people to face the results of their choices rather than protecting them from reality through sacrifice and manipulation. Her support reinforced my determination to maintain professional and ethical boundaries while remaining open to genuine family reconciliation if my parents chose to acknowledge their mistakes and demonstrate real change in their attitudes and behaviors. 6 months after Derek's arrest and the collapse of Pinnacle Investment Strategies, I received a certified letter that would test every principle I had developed about family relationships and personal integrity. The thick envelope arrived at my office on a Friday afternoon, delivered by a process server who required my signature and identification before releasing the documents. The letterhead belonged to Mitchell and Associates, a law firm I recognized from their advertisements during late-night television programming. Their primary business involved personal injury claims and debt collection services rather than sophisticated legal representation, which immediately suggested the quality of advice my parents were receiving. The letter's contents were so outrageous that I initially assumed it was some form of elaborate joke or misunderstanding. The attorneys were demanding $122,000 on behalf of my parents, claiming that I owed this money to my family, based on moral obligation, and suggesting that my refusal to help would demonstrate selfish ingratitude toward the people who had raised and supported me. The legal reasoning was as flawed as it was offensive. The letter argued that my parents had invested significantly in my childhood development, including housing, food, healthcare, and educational expenses, creating a debt that I had never acknowledged or repaid. They claimed that since Derek had received equivalent financial support through his college education and business funding, basic fairness required me to reciprocate by supporting Derek during his current legal difficulties. I immediately called the law firm to schedule a meeting with whoever had drafted this absurd document. The receptionist connected me with Thomas Mitchell, an attorney, whose voice carried the oily confidence of someone accustomed to intimidating people through legal threats and technical language designed to confuse rather than inform. Mitchell explained that my parents had retained his services to recover what they considered their rightful compensation for years of unacknowledged investment in my success. He claimed they had calculated the precise value of their parental expenses and determined that my current prosperity obligated me to provide equivalent support for Derek's legal defense and family financial recovery. The conversation became increasingly heated as I pointed out the fundamental flaws in their legal theory. Parents are legally required to provide basic care for minor children, making it impossible to create debt through fulfilling legally mandated responsibilities. Additionally, Derek had squandered far more family money than I had ever received, and his criminal behavior deserved consequences rather than continued enabling through family sacrifice. Mitchell's response revealed the desperation underlying my parents' legal strategy. He acknowledged that their moral claims had no legal foundation, but suggested that protracted litigation could damage my business reputation and cost more than simply paying the demanded amount. His tone carried implicit threats about negative publicity and professional consequences that could result from refusing to settle their claims. However, his most shocking revelation came when he presented documents suggesting that my parents could pursue partial ownership of Rodriguez Cybersecurity Solutions based on their early investment in my education and development. The paperwork claimed that their financial support during my childhood had created the foundation for my current business success, entitling them to a percentage of my assets and future earnings. The legal documents were professionally formatted but contained arguments so ridiculous that any competent attorney would dismiss them immediately. However, I realized that my parents might actually believe these claims had merit, having convinced themselves that my success belonged partially to them rather than resulting from my own effort and integrity. When I challenged Mitchell about the ethics of pursuing such obviously frivolous claims, his response confirmed my worst suspicions about his motivation and professional standards. He admitted that the case had little chance of success in court, but suggested that my family relationships created emotional pressure that might motivate a settlement regardless of legal merit. That evening, I called my parents directly to discuss their legal demands and understand the reasoning behind their actions. The conversation provided painful insight into how years of poor decisions and enabling behavior had distorted their perception of responsibility, fairness, and family relationships. My father's justification revealed the depth of his delusion about Derek's situation and my obligations as a family member. He claimed that Derek's criminal charges were simply bad luck, rather than consequences of deliberate choices, and that family loyalty required me to sacrifice my financial security to minimize Derek's legal problems. He calculated the exact amount they had spent on my childhood expenses, including estimates for housing costs, food expenses, healthcare premiums, and educational materials. In his mind, these legally required parental expenses created legitimate debt that I had never acknowledged or repaid, making their current demands a simple matter of collecting money I already owed. My mother's approach was more emotional but equally manipulative. She described Derek's terror about potential prison sentences and claimed that his mental health was deteriorating rapidly due to stress and uncertainty about his future. She portrayed my refusal to help as cruelty toward a brother who needed family support during the most difficult period of his life. Neither parent acknowledged the suffering Derek's crimes had caused throughout our community, or the betrayal his victims felt after trusting someone they had known for years. Their complete focus on protecting Derek from consequences demonstrated that years of favoritism had created moral blindness that prevented them from recognizing the harm their enabling behavior had caused. The conversation ended with my parents issuing an ultimatum that exposed the true nature of their relationship with me. They demanded a response to their financial demands within 2 weeks, threatening to proceed with litigation if I refused to provide the money Derek needed for his legal defense and their family financial recovery. Their tone suggested that they viewed this threat as powerful leverage that would force my compliance regardless of the merit of their claims. They seemed unable to comprehend that their demands had finally pushed our relationship beyond any possibility of repair, or that their willingness to pursue frivolous litigation demonstrated exactly why maintaining distance had been necessary for my well-being. That night, I realized that my parents viewed me solely as a financial resource to solve problems created by their favoritism and poor judgment. They had never accepted responsibility for the consequences of their choices, and they would never acknowledge the damage their enabling behavior had caused to our family relationships and community trust. My response to my parents' outrageous demands required careful planning and legal consultation to protect both my personal assets and my business interests. I retained Sarah Chen, an attorney who specialized in family law and business protection, to ensure that my reply would be comprehensive, legally sound, and permanent. Sarah's expertise proved invaluable in crafting a response that addressed every aspect of my parents' claims while establishing clear boundaries for future interactions. Her experience with similar cases involving family financial manipulation provided insights that helped me understand the psychological dynamics underlying my parents' behavior and expectations. The letter we composed together was a masterpiece of legal precision and factual documentation that systematically dismantled every argument my parents had presented. Sarah helped me organize financial records, correspondence, and documentation that created an indisputable timeline of events stretching back to my high school graduation and college rejection. We began by addressing their fundamental misunderstanding of parental legal obligations and family financial relationships. The letter explained that parents are required by law to provide basic necessities for minor children, making it impossible to create debt through fulfilling legally mandated responsibilities. Their claims about childhood expenses were legally meaningless and ethically questionable. The documentation revealed the true history of our family's financial interactions, including the money stolen from my grandmother's inheritance, the funds wasted on Derek's gambling debts and failed ventures, and the clear pattern of favoritism that had prioritized Derek's wants over my legitimate needs throughout our relationship. My cybersecurity expertise had proven invaluable in recovering deleted financial records and communications that demonstrated Derek's fraudulent activities had begun years before his official business launch. Email backups, transaction logs, and social media posts created an irrefutable record of his deceptive practices and our parents' willingness to ignore obvious warning signs. The letter informed my parents that any attempt to pursue legal claims against my assets would result in me providing this comprehensive evidence to federal investigators who were still building their case against Derek. I made clear that while I bore no responsibility for Derek's criminal choices or their consequences, I would defend myself vigorously against any attempts at manipulation or extortion. However, the letter also demonstrated my fundamental decency and continued concern for their well-being despite their betrayal and demands. I offered to help them find legitimate financial counseling services and legal assistance for navigating their retirement planning crisis while maintaining firm boundaries about my own involvement in Derek's legal problems. I expressed genuine sadness about the destruction of our family relationships, but refused to enable further destructive behavior through financial sacrifice or emotional manipulation. The letter explained that healthy family relationships require mutual respect and accountability, neither of which had characterized their treatment of me throughout my adult life. Sarah insisted that we include specific language about the consequences of continued harassment or frivolous litigation. The letter warned that future attempts to contact me through attorneys or third parties would be considered stalking and harassment, potentially resulting in restraining orders and civil liability for damages to my business reputation. The response concluded with a clear statement about my willingness to rebuild family relationships if my parents chose to acknowledge their mistakes and demonstrate genuine change in their behavior and attitudes. However, I made equally clear that any reconciliation would require their acceptance of responsibility for the harm they had caused, not continued demands that I sacrifice my integrity for their comfort. 3 weeks after sending the letter, I received a brief response from Mitchell and Associates stating that my parents had decided not to pursue litigation. The terse notification suggested that competent legal review had confirmed what I already knew: their claims were frivolous and their demands were legally groundless. Derek's legal case proceeded according to the predictable timeline of federal criminal prosecution. Faced with overwhelming evidence of his fraudulent activities and the testimony of dozens of victims, his attorneys negotiated a plea agreement that included significant prison time and financial restitution requirements. During his sentencing hearing, Derek finally delivered an apology that acknowledged the harm he had caused to our community. His statement expressed genuine remorse for the financial devastation his crimes had created and accepted full responsibility for his choices without blaming external circumstances or family dynamics. My parents were forced to sell their house and move into a modest apartment as they dealt with the financial consequences of investing their retirement savings in Derek's fraudulent scheme. However, I learned through my Aunt Sarah that they were receiving assistance from community organizations and social services that helped elderly fraud victims navigate their financial difficulties. 6 months later, while reviewing security footage from our company's latest major client installation, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point in my life. Rodriguez Cybersecurity Solutions had secured a contract with a Fortune 500 company, validating years of hard work and ethical business practices that had built our reputation throughout the industry. Jennifer and I had purchased our dream house and were planning our wedding for the following spring. Our relationship was built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine partnership rather than manipulation or emotional dependency. We supported each other's professional goals while maintaining our individual identities and interests. The contrast with my family's dysfunction couldn't have been more stark. While they continued dealing with the consequences of years of poor decisions and enabling behavior, I had created a life built on integrity, personal responsibility, and meaningful relationships with people who valued character over convenience. The most important lesson I learned through this painful experience was that true family members support each other's growth and success rather than demanding sacrifice for poor decisions. Healthy relationships require accountability and mutual respect, not blind loyalty and financial exploitation disguised as family obligation. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for people is allow them to experience the natural consequences of their choices rather than enabling continued destructive behavior through sacrifice and manipulation. Protecting people from reality prevents them from developing the wisdom and strength necessary for genuine change and personal growth. As I looked toward the future, I felt profound gratitude for the mentors and friends who had supported my journey toward independence and success. Gary's guidance had provided opportunities I never could have imagined, while Jennifer's love had created the foundation for a healthy family relationship based on mutual respect and shared values. My story demonstrates that family relationships built on favoritism and manipulation will eventually collapse under the weight of their own dysfunction. However, individuals who maintain their integrity and work toward meaningful goals can create new relationships and opportunities that provide the support and love that healthy families should offer. The pain of family estrangement never completely disappears, but it can be transformed into wisdom that helps guide future decisions and relationships. My parents' betrayal taught me the importance of surrounding myself with people who value my character and support my growth rather than viewing me as a resource to solve their problems. Today, I encourage anyone facing similar family dysfunction to remember that you deserve relationships built on mutual respect and genuine care. Don't sacrifice your integrity or future happiness to enable other people's poor decisions, even when those people are family members who claim to love you. Setting healthy boundaries isn't cruelty, it's often the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved. True family relationships survive honest communication and accountability, while toxic relationships collapse when exposed to truth and natural consequences. What would you do if your family demanded that you sacrifice your future to solve problems they created through years of poor decisions? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and personal integrity? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if it resonated with your own experiences. Thank you for listening to my story and supporting this channel. I hope sharing my journey helps others recognize that independence and success are possible even when family relationships become obstacles rather than sources of support. Remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions or demands, and that building a life based on your own values and goals is always worth the temporary pain of difficult transitions. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building successful, independent lives, and share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing that they have the strength to choose their own path forward. Until next time, remember that your future belongs to you, and no one has the right to demand that you sacrifice your dreams for their mistakes.